Thank you all. Thank you all for joining. My name is Tom DeVito. I'm the National Director for Families for Safe Streets. I'm going to set the table a little bit here before passing it over to my colleagues for kind of the bulk of the programming today. So just want to introduce a little bit about Families for Safe Streets for those who may not be familiar with us. This might be the first time that you've joined a webinar that we've hosted or seen kind of the work that we do. But we are a street safety organization that has been around for over 10 years now. We were started in 2014 in New York, but have subsequently grown all over the country. We now have around 20 chapters and 1,200 people in our network. We're an organization of grief advocates and victim survivors. Every person who is a member of Families for Safe Streets has been directly impacted by a traffic crash. They've either survived with serious injuries or if they've lost a loved one. We have a mission to confront the preventable epidemic of traffic injuries and deaths through advocacy and support. So that is a two-sided mission where we are both providing support services for people who have been impacted, and then providing pathways to advocate for change at the local, state, and federal level. And we are dedicated to supporting the safe system approach to traffic safety, which includes these 5 major elements here: advocating for safer speeds, safer street infrastructure, safer vehicle design, supporting victims, and then improving post-crash care. So this is the second workshop that we have organized related to what we're calling the Stop Super Speeders campaign, which is a broad effort designed to identify the worst of the worst speeders in states, mandate. If somebody could go on mute, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm getting some background noise. Thank you all so much. So this is a policy approach very much inspired by previous efforts to rein in drunk driving by having drunk folks who have driven drunk to install breathalyzer or IID technology in their vehicle. And we wanted to take that same principle and apply it to the worst of the worst speeders. And the reason for this is that speeding is a leading contributing cause of traffic death in the United States, performs terribly compared to every other major industrialized nation when it comes to traffic safety outcomes. So this is like I mentioned, the second webinar diving into the Stop Super Speeders campaign. The first webinar was a broad introduction to the technology of intelligent speed assistance, which is the technology that we're advocating for, as well as kind of a broad overview of some of the efforts that are happening around the country. This is a webinar that is dedicated towards taking that next step. So now that we know a little bit about the technology, the opportunity that's in front of us right now that is picking up steam in states across the country, what can activists and advocates and community members who want to bring this approach to their local state, what can you do to get involved? So that is the kind of broad context of this webinar today. And I want to really thank everybody who has participated across the country up to date on this effort. And I want to thank, in particular, America Walks, who has joined, who has been a close partner on this, as well as the Vision Zero Network, and then there are many other organizations too. I also want to thank Rep. Mari Levitt, who is going to be headlining the front half of today's webinar with our policy and advocacy chair, Patty Avery, who is going to be introducing herself shortly and will be doing more proper introduction to Mari Levitt. But Mari, Rep. Levitt introduced one of the first successful bills in the Stop Super Speeder approach to traffic safety, and in a very inspiring, extremely effective one legislative term effort. So we could not be more thrilled to have this conversation today before breaking out into some breakout groups. Folks will have 3 different options. You've all been given a little bit of information about what those options are related to storytelling, campaign planning in California specifically, as well as identifying a legislative champion. And Before I hand it over officially to Patty, I just want to make sure to give you a little bit of, we're about to put a poll out there. Britannia, our comms director, is going to put a poll out there and encourage everyone to participate in it if you can. We really just want to get a sense of like who is in the room, the proverbial room with us at this moment. A little bit about your interest in this issue, a little bit more about your background. That will really help us in the next stage after this webinar, plugging folks in if you're interested in future opportunities. So with that said, really want to just hand it over to Patty, who is an incredible advocate, has a very powerful story that maybe she will share just very briefly, and then we'll jump into the Q&A, the interview with Rep Levitt. So Patty, turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. I'm a member of what our founder, Amy Cohen, calls this horrible club because my daughter, Bethany, who was 37 years old, was killed by a speeding driver who ran a stoplight and T-boned her compact car. And she left behind not only her husband and a 2-year-old son, but her whole classroom of fourth graders who were deeply impacted by her loss. And as for me, as anyone on the call who knows who's lost someone, that loss is something I feel every single day, even 6.5 years later. That's why I'm a member of Families for Safe Streets and why I'm fighting hard in the Stop Super Speeders campaign, because speed was the cause of Bethany's death. So with that, I would like to, it's my privilege and honor to introduce Representative Mari Levitt. She joined the Washington State Legislature in January of 2019. She represents District 28, which is southwest of the city of Tacoma. She serves as co-chair of the Joint Committee on Veterans and Military Affairs and as a member of the Capital Budget Committee, the Appropriations Committee, the Rules Committee, and the Post-Secondary Education and Workforce Committee. In 2022, she was also elected by her colleagues to the leadership role of Deputy Majority Whip. Mari was selected to attend the 2021 Western Legislative Academy and to serve as a higher education fellow with the National Conference of State Legislatures. She's on the NCSL Education Committee and Council of State Governments Education Committee, as well as a member of the Washington Task Force Against Trafficking of Persons. She earned her associate degree from Tacoma Community College, bachelor's and master's of education from Western Washington University, and her doctorate in community college leadership from Oregon State University. With that, welcome, Representative Levitt. We're thrilled that you could make time to join us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor, and sorry for your loss, Patty.
Thank you. Now, it was interesting as we saw your bio, traffic safety doesn't figure into what you've done in the past. So if you could begin by telling us about the BEAM Act and then by sharing what motivated you to take on this issue of super speeders in Washington.
Sure. And hopefully all can hear me well. That you're right. I'm not a transportation planner, and I don't work for the DOT or Washington State Department of Transportation or have an engineer or any of that. But I am a legislator with a district that I care deeply about, and traffic safety is important to those that I serve. The BEAM Act came about because of just that. In March of 2024, there was a fatal crash that killed 4 people, two 12-year-olds, a 13-year-old, and a 38-year-old mom of children. And that mom happened to grow up in my district. Her family lives in my district. And certainly, long-term connection to our district. So when the fatal crash happened and I heard about it, I quickly got to work. I reached out to the chairs of our Public Safety Committee and Transportation Committee because I wasn't sure which committee would have ultimate jurisdiction, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do either. I just knew I needed to address speeding, excessive speeding. It's one of the top 2 reasons that people die or have property damage in our state in Washington, and so really important to address traffic safety. And it's something I had heard about and we'd seen about for quite some time. And we often heard it from our Washington State Patrol, and local law enforcement, as well as the impact to their communities for speeding. So that's how the BEAM Act came to be. And let me just start with the most important names. BEAM stands for Buster, Eloise, Andrea, and Matilda. Those are the four who lost their lives. Three separate families were impacted significantly by that fatal crash that caused those four to lose their lives. But then also the two children, Andrea's two children, those three weren't her children. They were all carpooling together. Her children have lifelong injuries, pretty severe lifelong injuries as a result, and they ended up in the emergency room and are still recovering. So really terrible loss that inspired the BEAM Act, and why I got so feisty to get it done on their behalf.
Thanks for sharing that, and thank you for taking up their cause. As advocates, we deeply, deeply appreciate that. Now, the legislative process can feel really opaque to people outside government. Now, I had an inside track. My husband was an Indiana state representative, so to me, it's second nature to understand this. But could you tell us about the key steps in getting a bill passed in Washington? We do recognize that it varies from state to state, but there are a lot of very similar steps in the process.
Sure. And again, it does vary state by state, but there are certain elements that I think cross state lines, if you will. And the first is identifying a legislator who will carry your cause. You know, in my case, I didn't wait for the family to contact me. I knew the family and got to work, and then reached out to them much longer afterwards because it was just too soon to reach out. But find a legislator who, preferably if you lost a family member, find the legislator from your district who represents you. The most powerful thing for a legislator is representing someone from their district on behalf of their family. And so that's the first tip I would have. Once you do that, then it's just a matter of the legislator, getting to work. Like I said, I reached out to the two chairs and had an initial meeting. Here's what I want to work on. I don't know where I want to go and what direction I'm going to follow, but I know this is important and we need to do something about it. And we had focused on traffic safety issues, driver's ed, making sure we have strong driver's ed, red light cameras, worker safety zones, to make sure that our workers are safe from excessive speeders, all of those things. But this was a little different to address our super speeders on the road who are causing the disproportionate amount of fatal crashes and death. So from there, it was a matter of then expanding the circle. So myself and the two chairs, three legislators, expanded it to our policy staffers who represent our interests in the work that we do, and also reached out, in my case, to the Traffic Safety Commission, and other states may have a similar kind of thing, and involved them, reached out to the Department of Licensing, and I'll tell you a story about them later, but invited them, and those groups invited a couple other people as well. And then our drafters, any legislator who says that they wrote a bill is not being honest. No legislator writes a bill themselves. There are staff who are super wicked smart who assist in that drafting and assist in ideas and understanding how it works with the current laws in your state. So had those folks in the room as well. And we had several meetings, not quite sure what we were going to do, but we knew that ISA recommendations were made to our Washington State Traffic Commission folks a few years ago. And so this has been on their plate for a little while. So, and then talking to others and vendors, we decided to go with this. But it's really about making sure that you're contacting, as a family member, contact your legislature, but that legislator really needs to branch out and meet with all of the impacted folks that they can think of at the moment. Other people come out of the woodwork, and we'll talk about that. But so once that's done, then it was about drafting the BEAM Act. We didn't have a name for it. It was, I think the title is the Accountability for Persons for Speeding. Pretty basic. That's what it was. In the end, we named it the BEAM Act. But that's not something, again, that I was willing to ask the family members about for a bill they hadn't even heard of. What would you want to call it? So that happened at the very end, but started drafting and worked with the partners on those drafts. I started, like I said, last March, and we got it passed and signed by the governor in May of the following year. So it took a year and many meetings and many iterations of changes to the bill to make it palatable for folks. The other thing I did before the bill was dropped, I had it ready to go early in session. So that's another tip I would offer. It's a complex concept for legislators to understand. Many legislators in Washington State had never heard of ISAs before. And that was not something that I had never heard of an ISA before I started working on this. And so that was important to have that education. And it took over and over and over again. I had several meetings with several people, several legislators. But then I reached out and got started to work with folks across the party in a bipartisan way to get sponsors. Originally, I dropped it with just 3 sponsors, including one being the chair of our public safety committee, because normally I would get quite a bit more, but I just didn't have the time and I wanted it dropped so we can start going through the process. And so if you hear a legislator say, "Oh, I want to wait, I want to get bipartisan support, or I want lots of people to sign on and I need to educate them," no, they don't. Get it dropped because it's very complex and it's very confusing for people. And it took a lot of education and bringing in a car to the Capitol 3 times. So for legislators to see what an ISA was and to demo it if they wanted to. And so that happened in the House. I represent the House, and then we had to do it all over again in the Senate. And I had to educate a whole group of other legislators who had never heard of it before. And it was like starting literally all over again to educate and bring awareness for our policy staffers and those who drafted the bills for the Senate and the House to talk to each other, because the Senate staff had never heard of it. They didn't even know what the bill was. And so it took many conversations by our smart nonpartisan staff to educate the Senate staff of what the bill was and what it wasn't and how it works. So again, very complex bill. And then, there's everything in between in terms of repeating that education, connecting with chairs. I had several meetings with both chairs, talked to him. I also talked to the ranking members, called the ranking members and the members of the committee, particularly every member in the Senate. I called them if they served on the Transportation Committee because I wanted to make sure that I could answer questions, to tell them a little bit about what the bill was and what it wasn't, and then address any concerns that they may have going into the hearing. And then I did a follow-up after the hearing, and had the same conversation. Okay, what are you thinking now? And some of them were kind of grumpy after more so than the original education. But it was a very good conversation to understand what they had concerns about and how to make the bill better. And so really worked across the aisle with legislators who just had questions and trying to figure out how it would work and how it would serve their neighbors as well.
I just have to say, we should all have such champions in our states fighting for our issues the way you've described.
Thank you.
Now, as survivors, we often ask ourselves, and we're asked by new members, well, what difference does it make to tell my story? Is it really going to make a difference? How can it even help pass legislation? So what role did personal stories, especially from people who were directly impacted, play in shaping the bill or in persuading your colleagues?
Yeah, personal stories were everything. I mean, personal stories were the reason that this bill got across the finish line in year one. Bills like this that are so complex and in concept hard to understand. Our bill was patterned after the Ignition Interlock program, the successful Ignition Interlock program in Washington. So that's how I would describe it to folks. But even going into the first House hearing, I knew that there were some concerns from members and they weren't quite sure about it. And is it going to work? And what is it? And they were, I probably would say, a little skeptical, to say the least. A couples are like, we just need to throw everybody in jail. Well, that's not practical. That's not going to happen. And so they were, Democrats, Republicans alike were like, what is this bill? I don't know about this. The other thing I would say is going into the hearing, I had mentioned that we met with stakeholders, including Department of Licensing. The Department of Licensing folks tried originally suggested I not do a bill. This was in the planning and the working on it. And then they recognized that I was going to do one. That wasn't an option for me. And so then they said, well, why don't we do a pilot? Because they also had a competing bill that was more on driver's education and in lieu of suspended licenses, if they went through a training, they could get their suspended license lifted. And so they were advocating for their own bill. But that wasn't strong enough for me. So they went into the hearing with a script of how they were going to testify about the bill, and I knew that they weren't enchanted at all, to say the least, about the bill. I hesitate to say choreographed the hearing, but that's probably a better way. So the chair had I started, and then we had the member from the chair of the Washington State Traffic Safety Commission go after me, and she spoke about traffic deaths, safety deaths related to speeding in Washington State, and gave statistics. Very generic. They have to be neutral because they're a state agency. You know, they don't pro or con. They just give the facts. And then we had family. And so we laid the groundwork, but then the family members spoke, and not the family members from the letters of Beam, the three families, not one of them. But we had enlisted family members with your help, Families for Safe Streets in Washington and others. So very grateful to you all for your work to get folks there. But several family members, a mom started off, and then a dad, and then someone else started off, and they shared the stories. And then a couple who joined on the east side of the state. So we had east side rural families, West Side, urban Seattle families, Republicans and Democrat families, didn't matter. And they testified of their loss. They testified of the speeder who killed their child or their partner. And powerful. I mean, people were in tears. I mean, I say people, I mean legislators were in tears. Those who tend to just sit back and not, they pay attention, but they're like doing other work. We often do other work in committees, myself included. So I'm not throwing shade in any way. They stopped. I saw people lean in, and they were listening to the families, not to me, not to the chair of the Traffic Safety Commission. They expect us to say certain things, but they leaned into the families. After that testimony from the families, then came Department of Licensing. And the individual who from the Department of Licensing, I think was very, very moved. I know he was very moved. And he came in and said, we're going to work with Rep. Levitt. We appreciate the sponsors' willingness to have conversations, and we're going to work to get something done. I promise you, his testimony was not that as it started. It was about the cost, because it wasn't in the original draft bill. They had put a very high fiscal note. That's sometimes an agency's way to kill a bill in their own little way. But they also, in fairness, they thought that it was going to be a lot more than it was. They were making it even more complex than an already complex bill was. And they also had concerns about workload. Could they get it done, and was it going to work? And so, but he didn't say any of that. He said, we're going to find a way to get it done. After that, the conversations that I had with our Department of Licensing really became very different. They were wonderful partners. They worked hard to find ways they eliminated a huge part of the fiscal note. We adapted the bill so that we didn't have to do a separate, we originally had a separate license just for that. And they found a way, working with the Traffic Safety Commission partners, to propose a different way, still on the license, but to tie it into other work that they're already doing. And that made the difference. But all of that wouldn't have happened if the hearing wasn't fantastic and wasn't moving by the families willing to share their very personal traumatic stories to the committee. That changed the game for the entire bill all the way through the session. I mean, even legislators told me afterwards, they came up and they talked to the family when the family was done testifying. When we were done, we walked out. Republican and Democrats alike came out to thank the families for being there. I had a legislator tell me, Amari, like, whatever on this bill, dude. I was not interested in it going in. And that was kind of what he said. And he goes, what do you need? How can I help you? If you need me to run an amendment, let me know, whatever, because I don't serve on the Transportation Committee. It's the one budget committee I don't serve on. And became a strong champion as a result. colleagues who thought that we should just, it's too soft, or it's not criminal enough, that we need to just increase the penalties on the criminal side, which is a different conversation. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but this was transportation, not the public safety committee, so different jurisdiction. They got to a place where they could vote for it. They're like, you know what, you're right. We can do both. It's an and, it's an and, it's not a either or. We are going to do both, and they supported it. Our police and sheriffs supported it, and they worked with people who were a little concerned about it's not tough enough. They got them there, like, look, this is going to be a huge help for us, and the volume of supporters from diverse organizations that you wouldn't think would come together on any given day or at a dinner table all supported the bill because of the family testimony.
I think you've just given us all a master class in how to be effective advocates. Now, as you've seen other Stop Super Speeders bills from around the country, and you look back at the BEAM Act, are there elements that you'd consider adding in next year as amendments, or things that you've seen that caught your attention that you thought could be pursued in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple, certainly related to youth. We didn't carve out youth as a separate sector, if you will, in the bill. And I do think that there could be, once implemented and once it's up and running, that we could do a trailer bill to address youth speeding the first time. I think there was a state that did that, and I like that notion or concept. Again, not 5-10 miles over. I mean, I got a speeding ticket when I was 16, I deserved it. But I'm talking about high speeds. High speeds would be, I think, helpful. In Washington State, you get a notice from Department of Licensing, so they do pay attention and they give notice. My daughter got one. She too was speeding at 16. I don't know if it's a family trend, but not a lot. I mean, just 10 over, but just 10. But so she got a notice in the mail. And I happened to notice it and said, we noticed that you got a ticket. You just got your license. And here's what's going to happen if you get another one. And so it's kind of a notice, like this is the trend, the path you're potentially on if you don't nip it in the bud. But she wasn't at high volumes. And so if she had been at 100 plus over, I do think that having that on the for youth would be helpful and certainly would mitigate and have them rethink it. And so I think it's something worth looking at. But at this juncture, I'm grateful the bill got passed, working on implementation, and I think that that's really important. I want to go back though for stakeholders. The other thing that I think are important, if you can get, we had prosecutors and court support as well, and having a prosecutor who's worked with folks and knew about ISAs and is recommending her in her cases now. In fact, the speeder who killed the four of the BEAM Act, his sentencing at the judge imposed ISA so that when he gets out of jail, he's getting 17 years, but when he gets out and is in community custody and beyond, he can never drive again without an ISA. And the BEAM Act was mentioned at the hearing. I was able to, got invited by the family. Eventually it involved families, of course, but and so that's part of his sanction and imposition of the courts. And so having for those who are thinking this is not tough on crime, I had a local police chief in my district who sees speeders all the time in his city, and he's kind of in his town and he's kind of over it. He testified in support, and he was able to answer the question, well, do you think this is tough enough? And he said, well, it's a gross misdemeanor. That's a year in jail if you tamper with a device, because we patterned it after. He goes, yeah. He goes, it's way more than we have right now to deal with this and address this. So should someone spend time in jail? They're getting that. But this is an additional way to address the challenge. And so having and I was very intentional to invite him to participate because I knew the people on the committee and what they needed to hear. And so I tried to touch in testimony to talk to different groups of members on the committee to address what I thought that their concerns might be in testimony and be able to respond to questions that those individuals might ask the chief or might ask the family or might ask someone else. And so that was very helpful. But I do think on your question on other states, I think definitely the youth one, I think is great. And then there's a couple other states who didn't have any override functions. And, we're going to see how that override function goes. Virginia and Washington, the two states that have passed it, both have override options. And that was recommended by traffic safety specialists in case somebody comes up on you. You want to have at least an override. But, if we find out that it's used too often, then we may go back and tighten that up a little bit.
So you're getting really into my next question. What comes next? Now you're moving into the implementation stage, which in Washington is a 3-year implementation. So for you, as the bill sponsor, how do you see your role as the regs are being built and it's moving forward toward implementation?
Well, certainly bird dogging the bill implementation to ensure it happens in the way that it was intended is critically important. Sometimes legislators, we get a bill passed, we worked on it, we get a bill passed. It's an agency responsibility, and then we move on. We're in a short periods of time, and so we move on to something else, and don't pay attention to the implementation. And sometimes we find that, geez, that bill did nothing. Because it wasn't implemented in the way, not that it didn't have good intent, but the implementation kind of messed it up. And so I'll be working closely. I mentioned Department of Licensing. Their original proposal, when they finally got around and recognizing the bill was going to happen, was a 7-year on-ramp. 7 years, 2032. And I'm like, oh, holy heck. I didn't say that word, but I'm like, holy heck. That is just crazy. They had mentioned the fiscal note that came down significantly. So they ratcheted down their time quite a bit. I still think it's too long. They requested a little bit longer because they're working on some other projects. I've gotten assurances from the governor's office because I've had conversations we have a brand new governor who cares about public safety, former attorney general. And so I've asked him and his team to work with Department of Licensing to ramp down that off ramp down significantly. And I believe that they will do that. So the first is just to make sure it's getting implemented in a timely manner and a lot sooner than it. And so we changed the language of the implementation. It was a certain date, but we said no later than, because that allows them to do it sooner. Right. And so we changed that when we changed the timeline and put that in there because you can do it in 6 months. Great. Let's do that. The other thing that I'll be doing is working and doing what we'll call dog and pony shows across the state to educate folks about the BEAM Act. We were able to get funding for outreach in the budget as the bill was passed. To talk to families, to kind of let families and residents of Washington know that this bill is coming, what it is, what it's not. It's not, if you're driving and following the law, no one's going to make you have an ISA in your car, and driving isn't a right last time I checked in the Constitution. So, but we'll be educating what it is and what it's not and spending those dollars to educate prosecutors so that they can use this as a tool now. They can use it as a tool now, separate from implementation, and ask the courts to impose this on our super speeders. And we've already had a couple prosecutors do that. So very excited about that, or a couple cases where that's happened. We'll be educating the courts, judges. They may not know about it. Once a bill passes, not everybody learns about it all at the same time and in the same way. And so really working through law enforcement groups, I'll be attending, the police and fire and chiefs, not fire chiefs, police chiefs and sheriffs group. I'll be attending the line, like the Washington Cops and Fraternal Order of Police folks. Anyone and anywhere that I can get in, invite myself, and I'll be inviting myself to their meetings to ask if I can have 15, 20 minutes to talk about the bill and what it means, when it's implemented, and how it will do that. And I've got strong support. I mentioned the chief who testified. He's all in with me, and I'm sure he'll join me with the police and sheriff because he's one of them, right? I know that I'll get law enforcement members. I know the state troopers and folks will join me. The prosecutor who testified on the bill, and who also was the prosecutor of the case of the man, Mr. Boyd, who killed the 4, she'll join me. And so it's really about education, prevent and awareness now in this next year. And then also reminding the governor and their team how I would be happy to share the good news of their protecting their residents faster than originally intended to do.
Oh, this has been tremendously helpful. I do want to take, we're bumping into the time we need to break into our workshops, but Representative Larry Kraft from Minnesota had a specific question for you, and perhaps you'll be able to follow up with him afterwards about deciding on the period of time that ISA would be required and looking at increasing the time for multiple offenses, but we can help make that connection for you so that you can share that with
I would
him.
love to. And I was just in your state. I had a layover in Minneapolis.
So thank you so much. We're just infinitely grateful to you for the work that you have done. And, you know, when we create legislation that is ultimately prevention, the people whose lives are saved won't know that their life was saved because a super speeder had that device in their vehicle. But we know when we see those numbers come down. So thank you, thank you, thank you
Yeah,
for what you did in
absolutely.
Washington and for being a resource for advocates all across the country.
Thank you so much. And can I just say a couple more things just as a closeout? Folks who are legislators, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about it. But just again to the families, I just can't emphasize enough how important those family stories are to folks. And we know it's hard and it's traumatic for you to have to share it over and over and over and over and over again. I really worked with media and made sure we got lots of attention. I did an op-ed, connected with folks, and connected the reporters with family members to every family member who would be willing to talk, including those the family members who that where Beam is named after, and they've done several interviews. So we just really need you to stay strong and are really grateful. And we know it's hard, and we're asking you to share your story in a really inhumane way over and over and over again. But you are making the difference. I was just your Sherpa. That's it. The legislators are just a Sherpa to making sure that we're elevating your voice and sharing your story if you're willing to work with us in a way that we can make sure that it's dignified, but that your story gets out to folks because these bills will pass, but only because of your work.
Thank you. We will.
Thank you.
I'm engraving that message on my soul right now. Thank you. So I'd like to hand it over to Britannia, who will move us into our breakouts. Thank you once
Thanks so
again,
much.
Representative
Thank you
Levitt.
very much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for everyone engaging on this wonderful topic. Thank you, Mari Levitt and Patty Avery, for moderating this beautiful session where we can all get updated on what's happening and where we can all fit in for our own campaigns. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to break out into groups where you can join myself, staying here in the main room to have a Power of Storytelling breakout session, or you can join Amy Cohen, who's our founder and president, who will be leading a California strategy call with other California leaders. And lastly, we have a breakout room with Tom DeVito, our national director, who will be leading a Find Your Champion for Safe Streets. A poll is going to appear on your screen, and if you have not, if you don't see it, please just give it a moment. We're going to ask which breakout room you'd like to join. I'm going to let this go for a few minutes so that we can get, hopefully we can get 100% of everyone responding so that we can see where you're going for your breakout room, and I'll share the results after that.
Britannia, as host, we can't pick the room, so you'll have to assign.
Yes, I will assign y'all after to join. Yeah, 78%. If you cannot find the poll on your screen, go to the bottom of your computer where it has all the icons and you can see polls and quizzes. Or if you're on your phone, you'll have to click the 3 circle dots that says more, and it might be under that. We're at 86%, and it looks like we have, oh, the results are they're shaking it up. So we'll just wait about 30 more seconds. I saw some great comments in the chat, and I'd love to read a few from the main chat while we wait for people to do this. From Joe Martinez, I saw, "We need this state championship for road safety to talk to my legislators, my lawmakers." I think that is a great opportunity to see ourselves in the work. Additionally, Amy Cohen, thank you so much for putting in the chat that reckless drivers like the super speeders disproportionately cause harm and are 5 times more deadly. ISA works better, and you cannot speed without it installed. Those are some safe, proven facts that we know. And I'm looking forward to us continuing this conversation as we again break off into our groups for storytelling, strategizing on the recent California bill, which was AB 981 with Amy, or finding your champion with Tom. If you haven't, we're at 95%. We need about 2 more people to answer the poll, and I'm going to shut it down from there. Yeah, 10 seconds. 100%. All right. So it looks like we have, I'll share the results on the screen. 34% of people will stay here with me in the storytelling breakout room. And additionally, we will have 30% of folks in the California strategy call and 36% finding their champion. I'm going to create breakout rooms based off of these instructions, and we can do that. You should be able to, you should be receiving an invite based off of that poll, and I will be adding people as well. Give us a few moments.
Unless,
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for enjoying your breakout discussions and coming back into the main room. We're going to let everyone get back in, and then I'd love for us to be able to share a few report backs of what you learned in your breakout room. So if there's anyone from Amy's breakout room who'd like to share an aha moment, I'd love to give you a minute or two first, and then we'll go to Tom's room, and then finally my story breakout room.
Great. Well, sure. So I'm Amy Cohen, founder and president of Families for Safe Streets. And like many in my group,
Amy,
very
your voice is a little low for me. Can you speak up a little?
sure. Is that better?
Yep, there we go.
So again, Amy Cohen, founder and president, and part of the Horrible Club, like many of the people in my breakout room. And even though it was the California strategy call, we did have some folks from Hawaii and other places, but we did talk a lot about the importance of bringing together the organizations that we have connections with to build our strength and power. So to build coalitions. In California, the bill came close but didn't make it this first year, and we have another year to get it done, and we're really looking to help build out our coalition letter and get folks involved who are usually not involved in transportation. So hospitals, unions, civic organizations. We have a coalition letter and a sample email to send that letter out to folks and say, will you sign this form and sign on? So that's what we mostly talked about.
Thanks, Amy. And I'll go over to Tom's group. Is there anyone who'd like to share, or Tom, or I think Tom may have had to drop.
Patty, do you want to carry the ball? Or do you want
sure,
me to carry the ball? Okay.
I can, Tom gave us a really good overview of what it takes, who are your ideal champions, but we also all acknowledged that there isn't necessarily an ideal. I think Rep. Levitt's story that transportation wasn't normally something she'd have gotten involved with. But one of the keys is having someone who's well connected, and she knew how to get it done. But as our conversation moved into Q&A, we really focused a lot more on developing a coalition, the importance of building relationship with others. And Mike spoke really eloquently about the importance of making a personal connection with the individuals from the organization that you're hoping to build a coalition with, but to first get to know who they are, why they're engaged with that organization, and then tell your story. And out of that relationship could grow a new coalition. You could be growing a new coalition member.
I think if I added a couple more things, it was like how important it was to have a champion who understood the legislative process. And Dennis said, once you have one, that champion might be able to identify the Republican or Democrat in the chamber to make it bipartisan, or the person in the other chamber who they like to work with. But, getting at least one champion to start matters. And we also spoke about trying to get as much done as you can when the legislature's out of session. Meeting with the potential champions in district, with a coalition if possible. I didn't share this idea. Nothing wrong with going to the open house that they advertise, or going to the house fundraiser, and going and listening to the guy or gal talk about who they are and what they care about, and getting a question in then if you're having trouble getting a meeting. And I'll tell you something, most elected officials know their donors as well, just for what it's worth.
That's amazing. Thank you, Mike and Patty and Amy, for sharing all of these wonderful things from your breakout. For my breakout, I'd love to have Miranda Gray. Miranda, are you able to share?
Sure. So I fall in the category of someone not directly impacted, but at the next circle. And the thing I will take away from this group is how much I need to be careful not to go back to the same survivors to tell their stories, and to check in with them that I know other things that are going on in their life, whether they need time to focus on other things, because the body remembers, the relationships change after tragedies. Other things come up in people's lives. This is an important part of their life, but it may not be their entire identity. And it's important to check in that they're still okay to talk. They may have been okay 2 weeks ago, but they might not be okay today. It might be a special anniversary, or there might be something else going on in their life. So to check in and have a depth of people that can speak, so that you can not go back to the same person each time.
What a beautiful reminder for us all, as many of us have stories that we want to tell, whether we've been personally impacted, or if we are speaking up for a loved one that we've lost, or we use these same streets every day and we want change so that nothing else happens. We know that traffic deaths and injuries are 100% preventable, and we hope that you all who've engaged with our workshop today are able to continue taking action in meaningful ways in your community and plug into our national movement for families for safe streets. One of our call to actions that we're going to have for today is that you join us all in signing our Stop Super Speeders petition. I'm going to share my screen so that you can all see it live, as well as I'll share it in the chat, but we'd love for you to take a moment to complete this call to action. We're hoping to get 40,000 signatures for our Stop Super Speeders campaign. And I will show you what that looks like when you open it. So if you haven't seen already, we have 16,000 verified signatures, and some of you may even see your names here. I've gotten to meet Grandma Beverly, and some of these people whose names I see sliding at the bottom of these recent signatures. But we, again, want to see everyone who's in this meeting also support the campaigns that we have for stopping super speeders. If you want to learn more information, we will be following up with all the slides, as well as some more one-pagers on what ISA is and how you can continue to build this muscle and build support for it in your state. If you haven't already, please join us in the chat by signing that petition. And additionally, I'm making a call to action for anyone who's interested in building more support about just safe streets in general, to join us on two separate offerings, where we're going to premiere FFS's new safety science video with Jessie Singer, who is famous in the transportation world for telling her story of losing her best friend, as well as being able to lead as an authority on educating us about safe systems approaches. If you haven't had a chance to catch this in the emails that I've sent out to you, we are hosting 2 screenings on July 15th. That's going to be a Tuesday, where we're also going to engage members, advocates, supporters who want to understand, how do we bring safety science and the safe systems approach to our communities. We hope to engage with you to launch a house meeting strategy, or a community screening of this event throughout the summer before next legislative session so that we can have deeper conversations in our communities. We will be having this offering to watch the video and have a discussion with myself and Ali Geller, who's our support services manager, on July 15th from 7 p.m. Eastern to 8 p.m. Eastern, or for folks who are on the West Coast, we're doing a 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific time as well. We just want to thank you all for joining us for our national organizing workshop to help stop super speeders. And we encourage you all, if you have any further questions, to reach out to the Families for Safe Streets team. We'll be sending you an email with all the slides as well as more resources, as we mentioned. And that will be all. Amy, did you have any closing thoughts, or Patty?
I mean, just make sure many of you in my workshop asked questions about the technology or where's the bill or what's the bill number. Everything is on our website under Safer Vehicles. We have a ton of resources. We have an 8-page FAQ on the technology, how it works, all the questions we have gotten. And so we're a resource. Please reach out, whether you're looking to share your story for a bill in your community, introduce a bill. We had some, folks who are looking to do that. Or anyway, we are here to support you.
And I just add, as co-chair of the Policy and Advocacy Committee, if you're interested in joining us as a volunteer in that regard, we meet monthly, and just reach out to the organization and we can get you information on the Policy and Advocacy Committee.
Thank you all for your time, and we will continue fighting the safe streets fight with all of you. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.